My dad is going to fire you. Justice is for sale in this city, and you're just a nobody in a uniform." Those were the words that echoed through the quiet streets of Providence. Those were the words that 24-year-old Victoria Catherine Ashford thought would be her get-out-of-jail-free card. She sat in a pearl-white Mercedes G-Wagon, a vehicle that cost more than most people in this neighborhood earn in 3 years, and she laughed. She didn't just laugh at the officer. She laughed at the law. She laughed at the families. She laughed at the very idea that she could be held accountable. But Victoria made one fatal mistake. She didn't realize that her case would end up on the desk of a man who has spent 34 years protecting the soul of this community. A man who believes that a billionaire's daughter and a retired teacher stand on the exact same ground. Today, Victoria Ashford is about to find out that while her father might own buildings, he doesn't own the truth. And Judge Frank Caprio is about to deliver a sentence that will send shockwaves through the mansions of the Blackstone district. To truly grasp the gravity of this case, you must understand that Providence is a city of two completely different worlds. On one side, tucked away behind towering wrought iron gates, is the Blackstone district. This is Victoria Ashford's playground. It's a realm of sprawling million-dollar estates and lawns so perfectly manicured, they look like emerald golf courses. This is the empire of Jonathan Ashford, the CEO of Ashford Development, a man with a staggering $450 million valuation. In Blackstone, the air is different. It's a world where problems are merely inconveniences solved with a single phone call, and mistakes are wiped clean with a stroke of a checkbook. Then, there's the Riverside neighborhood. Riverside is the humble, beating heart of this city. It's a working-class sanctuary built by the hands of families in the 50s and 60s. Here, life moves to a different rhythm. It's where grandfathers like Robert Sullivan, who dedicated 41 years of his life to teaching, take slow evening walks. It's where mothers like Lisa Chin stand on their porches, watching their children ride bicycles with a sense of hard-earned peace. In Riverside, people don't have half-billion-dollar bank accounts. They have something far more valuable. They have a community built on mutual respect. On September 22nd, 2024, at precisely 4:45 p.m., these two worlds didn't just meet, they collided. As the golden sun began to dip, Victoria Ashford decided that the laws protecting the common people of Riverside simply didn't apply to her. She wasn't just speeding. She was piloting a 6,000-pound white Mercedes G-Wagon through a strictly 25-mile-per-hour zone at a terrifying 83 miles per hour. Think about the physics of that for a moment. At 83 miles per hour, you're covering the length of a football field every 3 seconds. In a neighborhood where children played just feet from the curb, this wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a calculated act of war against an innocent community. Officer Timothy Bradford isn't just any cop. He is an 18-year veteran of the force, a man who has seen the absolute worst of what happens when high-speed metal meets human flesh. He has stood at the scenes of wreckage, delivered the news no parent should ever hear, and comforted the grieving. So, when that pearl-white Mercedes G-Wagon streaked past him like a low-flying missile at 4:51 p.m., his heart didn't just skip a beat, it stopped. In that moment, he didn't see a wealthy heiress or a socialite. He saw a 6,000-pound weapon and a potential killer behind the wheel. When he finally brought the vehicle to a halt at the intersection of Riverside and Hamilton, he approached the driver's side, expecting the standard reaction. Maybe some nerves, an apology, or a realization of the danger. Instead, he met a wall of cold, calculated arrogance. Victoria Ashford didn't even bother to roll her window down all the way. She sat in the climate-controlled luxury of her $138,000 SUV, looking at Officer Bradford through her designer sunglasses, as if he were a common insect splattered on her windshield. Before he could even finish his first sentence, the venom started to flow. "Do you have any idea who my father is?" She sneered, her voice dripping with the kind of entitlement that comes from a $450 million bank account. She didn't just ignore the law. She tried to dismantle the man enforcing it. She looked this veteran officer in the eye and told him that with one phone call, he'd be stripped of his pride and sent to direct traffic in the worst part of town by Monday morning. She went for his livelihood. She went for his career. She tried to use her father's shadow to bury a man who was simply trying to keep the children of Riverside alive. But Officer Bradford is a professional. Despite the insults, despite the blatant threats to his family's security, he remained a rock. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lose his temper. Even as Victoria reached for her iPhone to record him for her 62,000 Instagram followers, turning a life-threatening traffic stop into a piece of digital entertainment, he stayed focused. She mocked his uniform, called him a wannabe cop with a God complex, and labeled him a nobody who thinks he's somebody to a live audience of thousands, while she was busy creating content and laughing at the pathetic officer. Timothy Bradford was doing the real work. He calmly wrote out 3 massive citations: reckless driving, excessive speed in a residential zone, and creating an imminent public hazard. To Victoria, these were just pieces of paper, minor inconveniences that her father's lawyers would toss in the trash. She went home that night feeling content, even proud. She sat in her bedroom and posted more videos, inviting 18,000 people to join her in mocking a man who had spent 18 years protecting them. She went to sleep convinced the story was over, convinced that in her world, money always wins. She had no idea she was actually handing Judge Caprio the rope that would hang her in court. This is a part of the story that truly makes Judge Caprio's blood run cold. This is the moment where accidental becomes intentional, and a mistake becomes a manifesto of pure arrogance. Imagine the timeline. It was September 26, 2024. Only 4 days had passed. Just 96 hours since Officer Bradford had pulled Victoria over. Just 96 hours since she was told, in no uncertain terms, that her driving was a lethal threat to every living soul in the Riverside neighborhood. Any normal person would have been shaken to the core. They would have parked the car, hugged their family, and reflected on their lucky escape from a prison cell. But Victoria Catherine Ashford? She isn't like normal people. At approximately 3:12 p.m., the exact time when the local elementary school bells are ringing and children are flooding the sidewalks with their backpacks, Victoria climbed back into that pearl-white Mercedes G-Wagon. She drove back to the exact same street, the exact same stretch of Riverside Avenue, and she treated it like her own private drag strip once again. But this time, a silent witness was watching. A Ring doorbell camera belonging to Mr. and Mrs. Dennis McCarthy at 403 Riverside Avenue caught everything. In high-definition footage, you don't see a car. You see a white blur, a 6,000-pound ghost screaming past a lens. Traffic analysts later looked at that frame-by-frame footage and confirmed the nightmare. She was pushing 76 miles per hour in that same 25-mile-per-hour zone. Think about the sheer, staggering level of arrogance required to do that. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a choice. It was a conscious decision to return to the scene of her first crime and double down. By hitting that throttle again, Victoria was sending a message to the entire city. She was saying, I don't care about your laws. I don't care about your speed limits. I don't care about the 7-year-old girl, Emma Chun, who was riding her bike just minutes before I arrived. And I certainly don't care about your officers. She was caught on camera, but in her mind, she was invisible. She felt shielded by the $450 million Ashford empire. She believed that the gates of her Blackstone estate were high enough to keep the consequences of the real world out. She thought that because she had 62,000 Instagram followers and a father who played golf with the city council, she had a license to kill on the streets of Riverside. What Victoria didn't realize was that while she was busy mocking the law on social media, the community of Riverside was fighting back. The McCarthys didn't just delete that footage. They brought it to the police. They brought it to the light. They made sure that when Victoria stepped into Judge Caprio's courtroom, she wasn't just facing a speeding ticket. She was facing the undeniable proof that she is a clear and present danger to society. As the court date for Victoria Catherine Ashford approached, the massive, cold gears of the Ashford machine didn't just turn. They went into a high-voltage overdrive. This wasn't about preparing a legal defense. It was about activating a network of power and privilege that had been decades in the making. Behind the scenes, in the dimly lit corridors of country clubs and high-rise offices, the influence began to pour in like a toxic flood. Judge Caprio, sitting on the bench with 34 years of unshakable integrity, reveals something that should shock every citizen who believes in the fair rule of law. Between September 25th and October 14th, his private chambers were bombarded. His office received 9 separate phone calls. These weren't calls from Victoria's friends or classmates asking for a break. No, these were calls from the untouchables of Providence. We are talking about City Councilman Richard Blackwell, a man who represents the 3rd District, but apparently spends his Sunday mornings playing golf with Jonathan Ashford. We are talking about Samuel Rodriguez, the head of the Business Alliance. We are talking about elite high-priced attorneys like Marcus Wellington, who didn't want to talk about innocence or guilt. He wanted to discuss mutually beneficial resolution options. In their world, a crime is a moral failing. It's just a business deal that hasn't been closed yet. Then came the letters. 5 formal, typed letters on heavy stationery arrive at the courthouse. They weren't asking for mercy. They were suggesting a transaction. They hinted that a harsh sentence would be detrimental to Victoria's bright future. And then they laid out the price. These letters suggested substantial donations to various worthy causes: the Riverside Community Center, the Police Athletic League, the Youth Education Fund. We are talking about amounts ranging from $75,000 to $100,000. Think about the sheer, sickening audacity of that. They weren't offering a sincere apology to the families of Riverside. They weren't offering to pay for Emma Chen's therapy. They were offering a bribe wrapped in the cloak of charity. They were trying to buy a not guilty verdict as if justice were a prime piece of commercial real estate in downtown Providence. They looked at the judicial system and saw a vending machine. Insert $100,000. Receive immunity. They truly believe that because the Ashford name is on the side of buildings, it should also be above the law. They thought they could reach out and tap Judge Caprio on the shoulder and say, "Come on, Frank, let's be reasonable. Look at the donation. Let's make this go away." What they didn't realize, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, is that to a man like Frank Caprio, a $100,000 bribe disguised as a donation is the ultimate insult. It is an insult to the robe he wears, an insult to the 34 years he has served, and an insult to the very bench he sits on. They tried to buy his integrity, but they didn't realize that Judge Caprio's conscience is the one thing in Providence that Jonathan Ashford's $450 million can never, ever afford. The Ashford machine thought they were clearing a path for Victoria. In reality, they were just building the prison walls higher, while the boardrooms of the Blackstone district were buzzing with strategies to protect a billionaire's reputation. The humble kitchen tables of Riverside were the birthplace of a different kind of power. While the Ashford machine was busy making phone calls to city councilmen, the nobodies of Providence were picking up their pens. They didn't have lobbyists. They had the truth. And in Judge Caprio's courtroom, the truth is the only currency that matters. Judge Caprio picks up a piece of paper. Not a high-priced legal brief, but a handwritten statement from Lisa Chun. As he reads her words, the courtroom falls into a deafening silence. Lisa describes the afternoon of September 26th. She describes a low, predatory rumble in engine that grew into a deafening shriek in seconds. She describes the animal instinct that took over as she saw her 7-year-old daughter, Emma, frozen on her bicycle. Lisa didn't just walk outside. She lunged. She described the feeling of her fingernails digging into Emma's jacket as she threw her daughter onto the grass. Just a split second before a white blur of steel tore through the air where the child had been standing. "I have never been so scared in my life," Lisa wrote. "I thought I was going to watch my daughter die. Now, Emma won't go near the sidewalk. She wakes up screaming because every car engine sounds like a monster coming for her." Then, the judge turns to the statement of Margaret and Robert Sullivan. These aren't just names on a page. These are the pillars of the community. Combined, they spent 81 years teaching at Lincoln Elementary. They spent their lives shaping the minds of the city's children, including, perhaps, the very people now trying to bribe the court. They were crossing Riverside Avenue, heading home from a quiet walk, when the Ashford Mercedes nearly pulverized them. They are in their 70s. They don't have the reflexes they once had. They had to literally dive into the dirt to stay alive. They described the heartbreak of being treated like obstacles on a racetrack by a 24-year-old who didn't even tap the brakes. Judge Caprio puts down his reading glasses. He leans over the bench, his eyes fixed on Victoria, his voice trembling with rare, controlled anger that chills the room to its core. "This is who I think about," he declares, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "I don't think about the $450 million valuation. I don't think about the commercial properties or the high society galas. I think about the mother whose heart stopped because of your arrogance. I think about the teachers who dedicated nearly a century to the city, only to be treated like trash by someone who has contributed absolutely nothing to society but noise and danger." He looks at the stack of bribe-filled letters from the Ashford friends and pushes them aside like garbage. "You thought your money made you a somebody and them nobodies," the judge says. "But today, in this sacred place, their safety is worth more than every cent your father has ever made." The tension in the courtroom is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Victoria's defense attorney, an elite Yale graduate with a track record winning unwinnable cases, stands up and delivers a desperate, polished plea. She speaks about biological development, claiming that at 24, Victoria's prefrontal cortex isn't fully matured. She begs the court to consider that a jail sentence would permanently derail a brilliant future. She wants the judge to see a confused girl. She wants him to see a victim of her own youth. But Judge Caprio isn't buying the excuses. He leans forward, his gaze cutting through the high-priced legal jargon. "At 24 years old," he says, his voice like a hammer hitting an anvil, "you are old enough to vote for the leaders of this nation. You're old enough to carry a rifle and fight in a war. You are old enough to sign contracts, to marry, and to bring life into this world. If you are old enough for those responsibilities, you are damn sure old enough to know that metal hits bone and bone breaks. You are old enough to know that a police officer is a human being, not a target for your mockery." Then he delivers the sentence that turns the Ashford family's world upside down. No deals, no fines only, no mercy for the unrepentant. He sentences her to 120 days for the initial reckless driving, 90 days for the cowardly intimidation of Officer Bradford, and 120 days for the brazen second offense. Total, 330 days. Nearly 1 full year in the women's detention center. And the judge makes one thing crystal clear. There will be no early release, no work release, and absolutely no special privileges because of her last name. He hits her with a $20,000 fine and a 4-year license suspension, stripping away the very privilege she abused. Finally, he orders 300 hours of community service, not filing papers in a cozy office, but in the halls of a trauma center. He is forcing her to look into the hollow eyes of families who actually lost their children to drivers exactly like her. The Ashford empire couldn't buy her way out of this one. Today, Victoria is just another inmate. As Victoria Ashford is led away, the designer sunglasses are gone. The laughter is gone. The Instagram followers can't save her now. Judge Caprio leaves us with a message we all need to hear. Compassion without accountability isn't compassion, he explains. It's enabling. If you don't teach your children respect at home, the world will teach it to them in a cell. And that is a hard, cold lesson. Victoria will walk out of jail when she is 25. She will still be young. She can still change. But for the first time in her life, she knows that in the city of Providence, justice is not for sale. If you believe that the law should apply to everyone, regardless of their bank account, hit the like button. Subscribe to the Justice Files for more stories of truth and accountability. And tell us in the comments, was 11 months enough? Until next time, stay safe and stay just